Clara Monroe had always been good with her hands, but when she stumbled upon an old, crumbling church for just $200, she saw an opportunity to turn a dream into reality. With a rusted wrench in hand and no shortage of grit, she thought she was about to tackle a simple restoration project. But what she didn't know was that beneath the rotting wood and shattered stained glass, the church hid a secret, a hidden nuclear bunker that would change her life in ways she never imagined. What was once a dream for a mechanic turned into a heart-stopping race against time. Before we dive into Clara's journey, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? And if you love stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode will take you even deeper into the unbelievable. Let's get started. Clara Monroe wiped the sweat from her brow, the early afternoon sun beating down on the rusty wreck of a truck she was fixing. Her hands, calloused and stained with grease, moved with practiced precision, tightening the bolts one by one. The steady hum of the shop was a comfort, nothing too complicated, just the routine of fixing broken things. But recently, the work had become harder to come by. More customers were opting for quick fixes, patching up their cars with cheap, temporary solutions. Business was slowing, and Clara could feel the weight of the future pressing on her shoulders. Her father's old shop had always been a sanctuary. It was where she learned the trade, where they shared greasy laughs and lessons. But since his passing, the shop had felt a little smaller, a little quieter. Clara had kept it going, out of pride, if nothing else. It wasn't about the money anymore, it was about keeping his memory alive in every engine she fixed. Today, as she finished up a particularly difficult job, Clara's phone buzzed in her pocket. Wiping her hands on a rag, she pulled it out and saw a notification from the local real estate listing app. $200 church. As is. No questions. Her heart skipped a beat. $200? For a whole church? The ad was simple, bare, bones. No photos, no details. Just that one line. Clara's curiosity flared. What was the catch? A church like that had to have history, maybe even character. It might be falling apart, sure, but for just $200, she could turn it into something worthwhile. Maybe even a second home. She checked her bank account, barely enough to cover this month's bills. But something about that listing pulled at her, something deeper than just a real estate deal. It was as if the church was calling her, offering a way to rebuild something of her own, a place to grow into, a place for her dreams to finally have space. The click of a mouse and a few exchanged emails later, Clara was standing at the front doors of the church. The air smelled of mildew and age, and the building groaned under the weight of decades spent abandoned. But as she stepped inside, a strange sense of possibility washed over her. The stained glass windows, cracked and faded, still managed to cast a dim rainbow of colors across the room. The pews, though weathered and broken, still held the shape of something once beautiful. She knew it was going to take work, probably more than she could afford, but this was her chance to make something her own, something she could be proud of. Clara looked up at the arched ceiling, the remnants of old carvings, and saw the potential in the chaos. The church wasn't much in its current state, but Clara could already picture it in her mind. New floors, fresh paint, a workshop, maybe even a small living space. She could see herself rebuilding it, like she rebuilt engines, bringing it back to life, piece by piece. She wasn't just fixing cars anymore. This could be her new project, her future, a place where she could finally stop running on empty. As the sun set outside, Clara made a decision. She was going to buy it. The old church, crumbling and forgotten, would become hers. She was going to rebuild something bigger than herself. But little did she know, that first step into the building would uncover something far more than an abandoned church. Something buried deep under the floorboards. Something that would change everything. Clara stood at the center of the church, her boots crunching on the dust-covered floor. The empty space echoed with the sound of her footsteps, each one a reminder of how much work lay ahead. The wooden beams above groaned as if protesting against the weight of the years they had silently borne. But Clara wasn't deterred. This was more than a dilapidated building, it was a canvas, a blank slate waiting to be transformed. With each day, Clara worked tirelessly, stripping away layers of decay, revealing glimpses of what had once been. She scraped the grime off the pews, wiped down the cracked stained glass windows, and measured out a space for a makeshift workbench. The small corners of her mind, once filled with doubts about whether she could really make this work, slowly began to quiet. Every nail she hammered, Every inch of dust she swept away made her feel more at home. This church, this forgotten space, was becoming a part of her. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. You can fix anything if you put your heart into it. It was advice she had lived by, even when things seemed impossible. And right now, Clara needed that heart more than ever. She had come to terms with the fact that she couldn't rely on the shop forever. This was her chance to build something on her own, something that belonged to her. By the end of the first week, she had set up a small area with basic tools, her father's old toolbox, a couple of power drills, and a handful of nails. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. She began working late into the nights, when the rest of the world was asleep. The sound of her hammer striking nails became a rhythmic comfort, drowning out the quiet. There was no pressure, no one watching her but the shadows and the ancient walls that held stories she would never know. As she sat down on the worn pew one evening, wiping her brow and looking around at her progress, Clara couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. The space was starting to take shape. The floorboards creaked underfoot, but there was life in them again. She could almost imagine herself here, years down the line, surrounded by the hum of machinery, her workshop buzzing with the same energy her father had once shared with her. It wasn't just about fixing the church anymore. It was about building something that represented everything she had worked for. It was about creating a sanctuary of her own, a place where she didn't have to prove herself to anyone, except herself. But then, just as Clara was settling into the rhythm of rebuilding, something caught her eye. In the back corner, where the pews had long been cleared away, there was a small, almost imperceptible crack in the stone floor. She had seen it earlier, but it had been easy to overlook amidst all the debris. But tonight, as the last rays of the sun filtered through the stained glass, she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just an ordinary crack. It was something more. Clara crouched down, running her fingers along the jagged line. The stone felt cold under her touch, and her curiosity grew. What was hidden beneath? She had been so focused on fixing the church's surface, on making it usable again, that she hadn't given much thought to what lay beneath. But now, the thought gnawed at her. She tapped the crack lightly with her hammer. The stone shifted slightly. It wasn't just a crack, it was a door. Her pulse quickened as she knelt down, running her fingers along the edges of the stone. The door was old, but sturdy, reinforced with metal hinges that looked far too modern for a building of this age. Clara's mind raced. This wasn't something she had expected to find in a church. With a deep breath, she grabbed the edge of the stone and gave it a firm pull. The door groaned in protest, but it gave way, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading down into an unknown space. For a moment, Clara hesitated. What could possibly be hidden below the church? Her heart beat faster, as her curiosity, stronger than her fear, urged her on. Whatever lay beneath this old church, she was going to find it, and she was going to fix it. But little did she know that this discovery, the first step down that narrow staircase, would lead her to a mystery she could never have prepared for. Clara's breath caught in her throat as the door creaked open, revealing a shadowed stairwell that descended deep into the earth beneath the church. A chill seeped from the darkness below, sending a shiver down her spine. She stood frozen for a moment, the faintest whisper of her father's warning echoing in her mind. Sometimes, the things we discover are meant to stay hidden. But Clara wasn't one to shy away from a challenge. She had spent her life uncovering the hidden details in engines, finding what was broken and fixing it. This was just another puzzle to solve. With a steadying breath, she grabbed a flashlight from her tool belt and descended into the dark. The air was damp and musty, thick with the scent of old stone and mildew. Each step felt like it echoed through the empty church above. She tried not to let the feeling of claustrophobia overtake her, focusing instead on the faint beam of light in her hand. The staircase spiraled down, deeper and deeper, until she reached a heavy metal door at the bottom. It was unlike anything she'd seen before. The door was sleek, industrial, and covered in rust, with strange markings etched across its surface. Her pulse quickened. This was no ordinary storage room. The door seemed to call to her. Clara placed her hand on the cold metal, feeling the weight of the moment. She wasn't sure what she expected to find, but she couldn't turn back now. Something inside her urged her forward. With a grunt, she pushed the door open. The hinges squealed, and the room beyond came into view. It was vast, far larger than she had anticipated. The concrete floor stretched out before her, cracked and worn, but still standing strong. Large steel beams supported the high ceilings, casting long shadows in the dim light. The room smelled like old machinery, dust, and something she couldn't quite place. But it wasn't the smell that held her attention, it was the sight before her. At the center of the room was a massive vault-like door. It stood tall, built to withstand anything. A thick, reinforced steel door, rusted with age but still imposing. The kind of door that could protect secrets. But what kind of secret could be hidden down here, under a church? Clara's hands trembled slightly as she took a few cautious steps forward. As her flashlight's beam hit the wall, she noticed a series of complex symbols, faded with time but still discernible. They looked like a language, some kind of code, etched into the stones surrounding the vault. Clara reached out, running her fingers along the cool surface of the symbols. She didn't understand them, but they seemed important. Her heart raced as the reality of her discovery began to sink in. What had she found? A bomb shelter? A hidden lab? A relic of the Cold War? Her mind whirred, but the fear she'd momentarily felt began to fade, replaced with determination. She couldn't leave this mystery unsolved. She was already in too deep. As she examined the door, she noticed something beneath the thick layer of rust was a small keypad. The numbers were faded, almost illegible, but Clara's sharp eyes caught the faintest trace of digits. 2379. She hesitated, her breath held in anticipation. Could this be the code? Should she even try? If she was wrong, who knew what would happen? But Clara didn't hesitate long. She pressed the numbers, one after the other. The metal door clicked, and with a deep, resounding groan, it slowly began to shift open. Clara's breath caught in her chest as a rush of cool air hit her face. The door creaked louder, its weight slowly swinging open, revealing what lay inside. Her flashlight flickered and illuminated the room behind the vault, a small room, filled with rows of heavy machinery, old documents scattered across tables, and maps pinned to the walls, each one marked with strange notations. But the centerpiece was a large, rectangular object in the far corner of the room. Covered with a heavy tarp, it looked like a military-grade storage unit, its corners reinforced with steel. Clara stepped forward, each step measured, her heart pounding in her chest. The silence around her was deafening, broken only by the soft shuffle of her boots across the concrete floor. She reached the object and hesitated for only a second, before pulling back the tarp. What she saw made her stomach drop. Inside was a large, intricately designed control panel, covered in dust and cobwebs, but still connected to a series of large cables running into the walls. This was no ordinary room. This was a facility built for something far beyond the simple church she had bought for $200. Clara's hands went cold as she realized the magnitude of what she had uncovered. The bunker wasn't just some forgotten relic of history. It was a place of power, a hidden weapon waiting to be activated. As she stood there, staring at the control panel, Clara's mind raced. What had she found? What was it for? And why was it hidden beneath a church? For the first time in her life, Clara realized she was standing at the edge of something bigger than herself, something far more dangerous than she ever could have imagined. Clara stood in front of the control panel, the cold hum of machinery vibrating through the walls around her. The room felt ancient, as though it had been waiting for her, a forgotten relic of a time long past, hidden away in the bowels of a church. Her breath came shallow and fast as she took it all in, her flashlight beam flickering across the strange symbols, dusty maps, and cold steel that surrounded her. The control panel in front of her looked like it belonged to something out of a science fiction movie. Buttons, levers, switches all neatly arranged in rows, some flashing faintly, some with lights long dead. It was all so intricate, so deliberate. This wasn't a makeshift shelter, or some hastily abandoned military base. This was something planned, something built with purpose. Clara's fingers hovered over the buttons, but she didn't press anything. Not yet. She knew she needed to understand what she was dealing with before diving in head first. There were too many questions. Too many unknowns. A loud creak echoed through the room, and Clara froze. It came from the far corner, the area where the tarp had been pulled back. She hadn't noticed it before, but now she could see a narrow hallway that seemed to lead deeper into the complex. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of old machinery and dust, and the silence in the room was suffocating. For a moment, Clara considered leaving, walking away from the whole mess. She had no business being here, no reason to drag herself into something this big, this dangerous. But something in her, something deep, primal, told her she couldn't walk away now. She had come this far. There was no turning back. Slowly, Clara made her way toward the hallway. Her flashlight illuminated the path ahead, revealing more steel doors, more ancient markings, more equipment that looked far too advanced for its time. She felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end as the floor beneath her feet seemed to hum, the vibrations growing stronger the further she walked. At the end of the hallway, another door stood. This one was larger, reinforced with thick steel bars and covered in symbols she didn't understand. The door was locked, but it was unlike anything she had seen before. This wasn't a typical lock. It had a keypad, yes, but beneath it were several rotating dials, mechanical, like something out of a Cold War spy movie. The entire door seemed to pulse with an energy she couldn't explain, an energy that beckoned her closer. Her mind raced as she examined it. Could it be another lock? Another code to crack? Or was it something more, something that required a different kind of key? Clara took a step back and looked at the room around her. The old maps on the wall, now visible in the beam of her flashlight, seemed to tell a story, one that she couldn't fully comprehend. They were dotted with strange markings, areas labeled with dates that didn't make sense. Some dates were long past, some were yet to come. Was this bunker part of a larger network? Had it been part of something more? Her hands trembled as she ran them along the dials, feeling the cool metal beneath her fingertips. A small part of her wondered if she was in over her head, if there were forces at play here she couldn't even begin to understand. But another part of her, the part that had spent her life fixing things, putting them back together, urged her forward. With a deep breath, Clara began to turn the dials, one by one. The first one clicked into place, then the second, then the third. As she reached the last dial, something strange happened. The air around her seemed to shift. The faint hum in the room grew louder, vibrating through her chest. A deep rumbling sound filled the air, almost like the very walls were waking up. Clara's heart pounded as she turned the final dial into place. There was a brief, deafening silence, and then, the door slowly creaked open, revealing a chamber that stretched beyond the control panel she had first seen. Inside was a long, dark hallway, lined with metal doors, each one sealed and locked. The corridor seemed endless, stretching far beyond her flashlight's reach. And at the far end of the hall, she could just make out the faint outline of another set of doors, larger, more imposing than the rest. Clara stood there for a long moment, her mind reeling. What had she uncovered, and why had it been hidden in such a place? Her gut told her this wasn't just some military installation, this was something bigger, something far older. She could feel it in her bones. This wasn't just a bunker. This was a legacy, a history buried beneath the church for a reason that Clara was now a part of. Taking a deep breath, Clara stepped forward, the door closing silently behind her. It was time to find out what lay at the end of this strange hidden path. Clara's heart raced as she stepped deeper into the bunker's labyrinthine hallways. The hum of old machinery reverberated through the concrete walls, filling her ears with a sound she couldn't quite place, like distant whispers, warning her to turn back. But there was no going back now. Every instinct inside her urged her to press forward, to uncover the truth behind what she'd found. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly before her. Each step felt heavier, the weight of the discovery pressing down on her shoulders. Every door she passed was locked, reinforced with thick metal doors that seemed like they hadn't been opened in decades. But at the end of the hallway, the largest door stood out. It looked like a vault, massive and imposing. Clara's flashlight flickered as she approached it, and she couldn't help but feel the weight of history in the air. What had this bunker been used for? Was it a military facility? A Cold War shelter? Or something even darker? The closer she got to the vault door, the stronger the sense of urgency became. It was as if she wasn't just walking through a forgotten piece of history. She was standing at the edge of something that could change everything. Clara reached the vault door and stared at the keypad next to it. The numbers were worn down, but she could still make out faint traces. The code had to be here somewhere. Her fingers hovered over the keys as she tried different combinations, her mind racing through every possibility. Then, with a click, the door unlocked. Clara's breath hitched. She pushed it open, revealing a control room unlike anything she'd ever seen. Rows of monitors lined the walls, all dark. The faint scent of dust and old electronics filled the room. In the center, a large table held maps and blueprints of the area around the church marked with strange, cryptic notations. And in the corner, something caught her eye, a dusty file, its contents sealed. Clara grabbed the file, her pulse quickening as she opened it. Inside was a list of names, coordinates, and dates, ones that felt too familiar. She recognized the coordinates from the church. Something was terribly wrong. She was not alone in this. Clara's mind was spinning as she sifted through the file, her eyes darting from one name to another. Each coordinate seemed connected to a part of the church's land, and the dates marked something ominous. These weren't just random points on a map. They were deliberate, calculated, and they were all in close proximity to where she stood now. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed behind her. Clara froze. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, and growing closer. She spun around, heart pounding in her chest. There, standing in the doorway of the control room, was a man she didn't recognize. Tall, dressed in a dark suit that didn't match the bunker's cold, industrial environment, he watched her with a gaze that seemed both calculating and cautious. "You're not supposed to be here," the man said, his voice low, yet firm. Clara took a step back, instinctively moving toward the wall for support. "Who are you?" she demanded, trying to steady her breath. "What is this place?" The man stepped inside, the light from her flashlight casting a harsh glow on his face. His eyes were cold, almost unfeeling, but there was something familiar about him. She couldn't place it, but he felt like trouble. "I'm someone who's been watching this place for a long time," he said. "And you're trespassing." Clara's mind raced. Watching this place? He must have been tracking the church, its secrets, for years. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. "What's really going on here?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "This is a bunker, isn't it? A Cold War relic?" The man's lips curled into a faint, humorless smile. "It's much more than that." His gaze darkened as he stepped closer. "And now you've found it. You've made it yours. But there are others who want it, and they won't hesitate to take it from you." Clara's blood ran cold. There were people after the bunker? After what she had discovered? She was already in over her head, and now, the danger was becoming all too real. Before she could react, the man took another step forward, his hand reaching into his coat pocket. Clara stood frozen, the envelope now sitting heavily on the table before her. The man's cold eyes never left hers as he waited for her to react. He hadn't drawn a weapon, but there was something about him that screamed danger. She glanced at the papers inside the envelope, legal jargon and military terms, and then back at the man. "What is this?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her hands trembled as she carefully turned the folder open, revealing the sealed documents. The words, "Government Contract," jumped out at her. But there was more: an offer of protection, a guarantee that the bunker would remain in her possession, but only if she agreed to their terms. "The truth is, you've found something far bigger than you could have imagined," he said, stepping closer. "I can offer you access to resources, to protection, but I need you to cooperate." Clara's pulse quickened as her mind raced. This was no longer about her father's shop, no longer about rebuilding an old church. It was about power, and suddenly, the idea of giving it up to this stranger, to the government, felt like losing herself. "What do you want in return?" she asked, though she already had an idea. His silence answered her question. The man didn't need to say more. The price was her compliance. Her grip tightened around the folder. She wasn't sure what to do yet, but she knew one thing. There was more at stake here than she could fully understand. Clara couldn't let it go. Every piece of the puzzle kept calling her back. She sat in the control room, the folder spread open in front of her, her eyes scanning the documents again. The government's offer lingered in her mind like a bad taste. But it wasn't just the deal she was focused on, it was the truth buried under layers of secrecy. She studied the maps, tracing her fingers over the coordinates. They all pointed to one thing. The bunker wasn't just a shelter. It was part of a vast network. The Project Sentinel. Documents she had uncovered outlined a plan to build secret facilities across the country, and this church had been strategically chosen as one of them. But why? The documents were clear about one thing. The church had been a front for something larger. And then, Clara found it, an old photograph, tucked in between the papers. It showed a group of military personnel and high-ranking officials standing in front of the church. The year was 1955. The photo struck her like a blow. These people weren't just involved, they were the architects. The church wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate choice, a safe haven for military secrets. And it seemed she had inherited all of it. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a knock at the door. The stranger from earlier had returned, but this time, he wasn't alone. The man stepped into the room, flanked by two others in dark suits. Clara's instincts screamed at her to run, but she stayed rooted in place. She was deep into something she could never back out of. She couldn't let them intimidate her, not now. "We're getting close, aren't we?" the man said, his voice low and measured. "The truth is, Clara, this facility could change everything. It's bigger than just one church, one bunker. It's about control." Clara stood tall, trying to hide her fear. She clutched the file tighter, resisting the urge to look away. "I won't let you take it. This place is mine now. I won't hand it over to people like you." The man smiled faintly, an unsettling gleam in his eyes. "You think you have a choice? You've already seen the consequences of discovering this place. But now, it's about how far you're willing to go to protect it." He stepped closer, dropping a new folder onto the table, thick with documents that looked far more dangerous than the first. "This is the real price. You'll want to see it." Clara's hands shook as she opened the folder. Inside was a list of names, some of them local, others far more ominous. But they all had one thing in common. They were people who had already tried to uncover the bunker's secrets, and none of them had survived. The room felt colder now, the weight of the situation pressing down on Clara's chest. She hadn't expected the danger to feel so real, so immediate. But the truth was staring her in the face. She couldn't walk away now. Not after everything she had discovered. The man and his associates stood by the door, waiting for her decision. She could feel the pressure mounting with every passing second. Would she surrender the bunker to them, or take a stand and risk losing everything? Clara took a deep breath. The documents, the threats, the heavy silence, they were all part of the game now, but she wasn't ready to be a pawn. She wasn't going to let anyone dictate her future. Not this time. "I'm not afraid of you," Clara said, her voice firm despite the storm of emotions inside her. "I'm going to finish what I started. This bunker is part of history, and I'll decide who gets to control it." The man didn't reply. He just nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. Then, without another word, he and his associates turned and walked out, leaving Clara standing alone in the control room. She wasn't sure what came next, but one thing was clear. This was just the beginning. The bunker had been hidden for decades, but Clara was determined to make sure it stayed in the right hands. Hers.